Good evening and welcome to the meeting of the Select Board for Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022. Almost said the wrong month. This meeting is being held remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. We originally were posted to meet in the Council on Aging, but because we had a question as to whether we'd be able to be recorded at the Council on Aging until this week, until the month of April, we have gone back onto Zoom. So my name is Katie Conlon. I'm the chair of the board. Would the other members please introduce themselves?
Arthur Doyle, vice chair.
Melinda Collins, member.
Okay, I see Richard Wells is on mute, but I saw Richard state his name.
Anne-Marie Fagan, town administrator.
Sorry, Madam Chair, Richard Wells, member.
Thank you. All right, and Mike Zulis is our fifth member, and he is on his way. He'll be logging in shortly. We also have our finance director, Karen Paval, and Linda Napoli of the Select Board office. The first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Maybe we could we'll put up the photo of the flag as always. We'll stand and we'll recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all. The next item on the agenda is public comment, and I see we have Joe McKettrick with his hand raised. Mr. McKettrick called me last night and indicated he would be coming into public comment. So let's move Mr. McKettrick over as panelist. And if there's anyone else who would like to speak and address an issue with the board at Citizen Speak, please raise your hand and we'll recognize you after Mr. McKettrick. Okay, I see one other hand raised, Danielle Dumais. So we'll go at, and Deborah Felton. So we'll go in that order. So Lynn, if you could move our attendees over to panelist, so that, or if MATV could help us with that. Okay. Thank you. Mr. McKettrick, I see that you're now a panelist. If you could unmute, then we'll be happy to hear from you. Mr. McKettrick, I don't know if you can hear us. We can't hear you. It looks like you're on mute. We just need you to unmute on the lower left corner of your screen. There we are.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Mr. McKettrick. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. A couple of days ago, I left a letter at the Selectman's office for the Selectmen, and enclosed with my letter was a 3x5 foot flag of the country of Ukraine that I want to donate to the town of Milton. It's my suggestion and request that the Select Board display this Ukrainian flag below our American flag on the central flagpole in front of the town office building on Canton Avenue. This gesture would demonstrate that the people of Milton support the right of all nations to enjoy personal freedom and a democratic form of government unhindered by aggressive totalitarian regimes. This would show our town's concern at the grievous suffering of the people in Ukraine and our respect for their courage in fighting bravely against the odds to protect their nation from cruel, unprovoked aggression. It is my view that past generations of Milton residents have always supported such basic values. So I wanted to make that as brief as possible. I don't know whether this is really an action by the full board of the Selectmen in the usual manner as to whether or not maybe it's just an administrative decision, but I would suggest that quick action is required to support Ukraine in its time of crisis. So thank you very much, Ms. Conlon.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKettrick, and for many of the members of the viewing public, Mr. McKettrick is a former member of this board and longtime volunteer on many town boards and commissions. So we're happy to to hear your comments tonight, Mr. McGettrick. Thank you for the donation of the flag. We don't normally respond at citizen speak, but this is an unusual request. And so I think I see Mr. Zulus has just entered the attendee group. If we could move him over, his hand is now raised. So I think if this is something that the board could put in the hands of the town administrator and ask her to handle this request, I think that would be appropriate. Do we have a consensus on the board? Mr. Wells? I see people nodding. Mr. Wells?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I agree 150% with Mr. McGettrick's intention and the spirit. You may have noted an email I sent you this afternoon about the protocols of the United States flag. We might be in a little bit of a dilemma. There is one thing, one of the protocols. I did a project for the town 10 years ago. If you may, Katie may be the only one who remembers this. And we used to have a second American flag that hung horizontally from the gazebo and then hung in the front of it. And it was actually turned out we had it hung wrong, which was we rectified. One of the restrictions on the United States flag that I mentioned today that I noticed is that I don't believe the flag of another sovereignty or another nation can fly in the same halyard as the United States flag. It can fly equal. I actually sent a picture that you want us forward to them. Usually they all fly equally, but where it's a 3x5 flag, if that is in fact the case, it cannot fly in the same halyard as the United States flag because we only have a single massive flagpole with no arm on it. Is that perhaps we could erect it in the middle of the gazebo on a freestanding pole similar to the ones we have inside, where it then would be viewed 360 degrees if that's the case. But I think we can leave it to Anne Marie to check that tomorrow. I actually cited the source and the actual quote of the notation that was in there about flags of other countries on the same single mast as the United States flag.
Thank you. But I think we need to be careful not to have too much of a discussion because this is not really on our agenda. It's a public comment. It's obviously a matter of great interest in the world and of urgency. And my sense by seeing some of the nodding heads is that there's a lot of support for this and appreciation for Mr. McGettrick for bringing this to our attention and donating the flag. So why don't we ask the town administrator to handle this in the most appropriate way, and hopefully that's the flagpole. But so, Mr. McGettrick, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
No, that's it. You have a busy night. I'm not going to monopolize your time, but thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, Chief Wells, for your exploration of the issue.
We'll get it done, Mr. McGettrick, one way or another. We'll figure it out.
Thanks very much.
Enjoying it.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. McGettrick. Good night.
Do I hit mute now? This is the first time I've operated this.
Yes, you can hit mute, and what we'll do is we'll move you over to the attendee group, or you can just
Excellent.
leave the meeting and cancel.
Terrific. Thank you. Oh, I'm now muting myself. Bye-bye.
Good night. Thank you. Next is Danielle Dumais.
Hi.
Good evening.
Hi. It's actually Mary Ellen Sweeney Dumais. Danielle's my daughter.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening to everyone. I'm a Milton resident, but I'm speaking to you tonight as a property owner in East Milton Square. I own the rugby building, which is seated between Dunkin' Donuts and the fire station. And you'd know it mostly by its tenants, which is the Milton House of Pizza and Lux Nails, and then a dental suite. Currently in front of the building are 4 parking spaces. And I have learned that one of the 4 parking spaces is set to be eliminated. So I am looking for your support in an effort to retain that 4th parking space. The space that is cited to be eliminated is not the one near the driveway, yet the one that is closest to Granite Ave to the fire station. I have been in previous dialogue with Mike Dennehy. I have now sent my concerns to Chase Berkeley. He's forwarded them to the engineer so that I can learn more if that is still the plan. The drawings he has shared with me from July of 2021 show that it is cited to be eliminated. I did watch the previous select board where all of you learned about how many parking spaces were being eliminated, which is a significant number for the merchants and the property owners. So I'm hoping that going and being proactive, that maybe instead of having it be eliminated, we can keep it. And I would appreciate any and all efforts as this is getting reviewed by this board, that parking space be retained for both the merchants, the citizens, and the property owners. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. May.
Madam Chair, just
Yes,
a quick
Mr.
question before she leaves. Can Mr. May just repeat the space that is to be removed from?
Sure. It's on a drawing that Chase Berkeley shared with me. There's 4 parking spaces right now directly in front of the building.
Right.
And it is the parking space away from the driveway of the building, closest to Granite Ave and closer to the fire station.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
very
you.
much. Our next speaker is Deborah Felton. Move Deborah over from the attendee group. And if there's anyone else in the attendee group who would like to speak at public comment, I keep saying citizen speak, I'm just used to that. But please raise your hand and we'll recognize you after Ms. Felton.
Hi, sorry. Hi, it's Deborah Felton, town meeting member, precinct 2. I just want to say that I was so happy to see that you had changed to a Zoom meeting today. I actually have been watching all the meetings of the planning board, the warrant committee, and the select board during the pandemic. And I know that the Council of Aging, the Cronin Building, and I think the Blue Building are also now have a hybrid option, and I hope that the select board continue that because I think it's really important. I've been aware of everything that the town has been working on, and I think it's very helpful to other town meeting members to have that option. In addition, I want to talk about the next meeting where we will all be together. I'm very concerned that when we're together in front of moderator Hiss, that if we're all going to be in the high school auditorium, are we all going to be vaccinated? Are we going to be required to have masks? As people know, COVID rates are creeping up a little. So I would like the select board to really weigh in with the moderator on that and to give consideration of how we're going to protect people who are immunocompromised or just are not comfortable being in a large crowd where people, we don't know who's vaccinated and who isn't. So thank you for your time.
Now I'm on mute. Thank you very much, Ms. Felton. I see no other hands raised, so that's the end of public comment. And we'll go on to our first agenda item, which is the town administrator search and the screening process. So the first item is the consultant and selecting the consultant. We've all received, we have a submission that came in from the Collins Center at UMass. And then, as everyone knows, we had put out an RFQ, or request for quotes, for this service. We have 2 bids that were submitted, one from Municipal Resources, Inc. of New Hampshire, and another one, Gov HR USA, which is based in Illinois, but has a local contact person and a person who would be assigned. Now, I just want to remind everyone of Town Council's guidance to us that our options here are to choose either the low bidder through the RFQ process or the Collins Center, which did not participate in the RFQ process, but we had previously asked Town Council to reach out and get a proposal from them, knowing that they've also served many communities in searches for not only town administrators, but other positions. So everyone has received all of the materials. The Collins Center bid was $11,000. The Municipal Resources, Inc. bid was the lower, I believe, of the two who submitted the RFQ responses. That was 19,800, and GovHR is 23,500. Now there's some discrepancy between advertising being included or not being included and travel time being included or not in those, but the overall dollar amounts were 11,000 from the Collins Center, and the low bidder is Municipal Resources, Inc. at 19,800. So I wanted to open it up to discussion and see what the members thought. Obviously, we want to try to move the search process as expeditiously as we can. I see Mr. Wells' hand is raised. Mr. Wells.
Madam Chair, I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I don't have any of these. I've searched everything. I saw it on the agenda today. I looked all afternoon. I don't have any of these in my email.
They were included in the package that Mr. Napoli sent to the board, though it was about 200 pages long. So she broke it up into 2 PDFs. Lynn, could you forward that email to Mr. Wells while we're talking? I know that's probably not going to give you enough time, Richard, to look at them.
I'd be happy to.
While we're talking. So let's open it up to others in the meantime. Any other thoughts or comments? I think the Collins Center information had previously come in, because this is dated the end of, so we all have that one. I think that the newer ones were the 2 RFQ responses. Any other comments or questions from members of the board, suggestions of how we might proceed? Mr. Zulus. And everyone, it's just with all the white backgrounds, it's a little bit hard for me to see the hands. So if I miss you, just please jump right in and speak up. Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought the both of the proposals had their benefits. The GovUSA has as its local presence someone who was a town administrator over in Westwood for a long time and has participated, actually assisted the search committee in this town back in 2016. They haven't had as many, it seems, projects in this area, but certainly I think that's a benefit. The prices, as you noted, are very similar. If you take out the advertising cost, I think they were at about $21,000 without the advertising cost, and the other one, as you pointed out, was $19,500. I thought the was it Municipal Resource Services? Again, they're in New Hampshire, a little more local. They've had maybe a little more. They've had more projects that they can cite in this area for town administrator searches and town manager searches. So, and they do have a local presence in Massachusetts. So I thought there were benefits there. They all lay out a timeline, which is about 3 months, which is good, I think, for getting an appointment. And then I actually thought that, when balanced, the Collins Center proposal was a very good proposal. They have someone who will be leading that, who's been involved in human resources in town government, and they've done a lot of, I think the most number of searches in this area for town administrators and town managers, including, I believe, over in town manager over in Randolph, right next door, and just throughout eastern Massachusetts. So I think they're all good bids. I think, on balance, my view is that the Collins Center probably gives us as much bang for the buck as any. There's a lot of experience there, and someone who seems to be running it, this Mary A.R. Carty, who seems to have a lot of experience, particularly in public sector HR. So that would be the one that I would, at least right now, not hearing anyone else from the documents, that's the one that I would favor. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Zulus, for summing all of that up. I really liked the Collins Center proposal, and reading the other two, I think Mr. Zulus is right. They each had something to offer, but I really still prefer the Collins Center. They've done so many searches. They're in our area, and also I thought there was a great benefit to having a municipal HR person. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Mr. Wells.
No, Madam Chair, I had read the Collins Center one, and just based on, I know I won't have enough time to read all these tonight, so based on remarks of Mr. Zulus, I'm going to take his comments as prima facie as to being true, factual, and I agree with Melinda on this. So I'll be ready to vote tonight if we get that, if we head in that direction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I concur. GovHR, located not but 5 towns from where I used to live in the Midwest, had more of an orientation toward larger municipalities and different government structures than what it is that we are. And I think the municipal resources, while with a very, very broad client base, seem to have more rural communities affiliated with it. I thought the Collins Center gave a succinct proposal. By the way, I wanted to also note that GovHR had an optional additional $7,500 in it for an assessment possibility if that was desired. And the proximity of the Collins Center, not just physically, but also in terms of its knowledge of the area within which this particular town is situated, I think is an asset. So I would concur with my colleagues. And on that basis, I'd be very happy to make a motion to move adoption or selection of the Edward J. Collins Jr. Center for the town administrator search.
All right. And Arthur, can we make your motion just subject to review and approval by town council and execution of a contract? Kevin Freitag asked me to have that included in any motion that we might.
Thank you, Madam Chair, certainly.
Okay, so Mr. Wells, I think, did you second?
Yes, I did. Enough on that, Madam Chair. Just a quick, do we have to list the amount or no?
It's $11,000.
I know, so that's I just want to cite them.
Their all-inclusive fee.
Thank
All
you.
right. Let me just say, I also thought that the Collins Center, because of the lowest cost and their reputation and the number of town administrator, town manager searches that they've conducted, would be my choice. So I agree with the comments that were made. And as Mr. Zulus noted, although GovHR was the higher bidder of the other two that responded to the request for quotations, Mike Gillette, who was a former town administrator in Westwood, would have been the person leading that. He did a good job for Milton several years ago when he took part as a volunteer while he was still acting as a town administrator, just helping another community at the request of a former member of this board, David Burns. He was helpful to the committee, so just wanted to publicly thank him and especially where he was mentioned previously. But I agree with the Collins Center bid. Do we have any other discussion on the motion? Okay, then if not, all in favor, Mr. Doyle.
Yes.
Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Collins.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay. So the next steps would be for Kevin Freitag, town council, to contact the Collins Center, work out a contract with them, which he thought would not, no matter who it was, would not take too long, and be able to get something signed relatively quickly. So we also have on the agenda some guidance for the screening committee. And obviously we want to get a meeting of their screening committee now that we've appointed the final member. And given that we weren't on television at our last meeting, our newest member of the screening committee is Cheryl Tagayas, who was appointed at our meeting, I believe last Wednesday prior to town meeting when we met just prior to that meeting. So we now have the 9-member committee in place and we need to schedule a meeting. Town council would be available to be at the first meeting. We just need to get a night when everyone can be available. So Mr. Wells and Mr. Zulus are our 2 representatives on that committee. So I think it probably makes sense to put for one of you to be in touch with town council and get the first meeting organized.
I have to call him on another issue tomorrow, Madam Chair. I'll gladly do that.
Okay, I've alerted him to check his schedule and propose some nights to us that he's available. And then perhaps working with Linda Napoli in our office that we can get a communication out to all of the members to survey their availability by email. Did anyone want to weigh in at this point on any guidance for the committee as to what the board is looking for? There's probably some issues that we'll want to weigh in eventually after we speak with the consultant on things like compensation or residency and what we're looking for. I see Mr. Doyle has his hand raised. Mr. Doyle.
Madam Chair, I'd only suggest that one of the things that we might want to do on this note is to ask the Collins Center once everything is arranged for what it is that they have for guidance for a screening committee. And then with that before us, we can then tailor it to be more specific with regard to the town of Milton.
Okay. And following up on that, we'll have to provide them the special legislation that applies to the town administrator, the existing job description, that sort of information. Mr. Zulus.
Just to clarify, those things wouldn't be a gating item to a first meeting, I wouldn't presume. Those are some things that could be added as the committee continues to meet. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so. Is everyone in agreement on that?
Sure.
Yes, looks so. Mr. Wells.
I just raised my hand to say I concur. I think that the perimeters and stuff will be figured out very quickly in the first couple of meetings, and then we'll be able to.
No, I know, but it's important that this committee has guidance from this board because it's ultimately the board that's going to make the decision. And, I think there are issues, are we looking for someone? My personal view is we want someone with town administrator or assistant town administrator experience as a preference. I know that there can be outside the box candidates or people in the private sector, but those are the sort of discussions we may want to have to give some initial guidance to the committee. But I think we can get the committee meeting and have their first meeting before we get some input from our consultant on that and put it on one of our other agendas. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, like Mr. Doyle, I was thinking in having read the Collins Center, I know it was, not as exhaustive as the other two, but I think that that should be part of their process, is to gather that guidance from us. But it would be good maybe when town council gets in touch with them, that could be an initial question along with drafting a contract.
Yeah, and I think another question that we want to explore is whether we want to have the committee solicit some input from some department heads before conducting interviews. We had a discussion about employee involvement when we selected the committee, and I think that was something that we thought was important to have discussed with the committee. All right, is there anything else on this topic before we move on to the budget? Another fun topic.
The only thing, Madam Chair, if I may, is that we signal that we have a very specific timeline, and we do not want to drift away from that timeline.
Yeah, I agree. We want to move expeditiously here. Mr. Zulus.
I was just going to say, Arthur, you can be assured that that we will push for that in the
meeting. Thank you, Mr. Zulus. The interim town administrator will be right there with us.
She's already working a lot of late hours and Sundays, so I know she doesn't want to do this forever. She came out of retirement for this, so we don't want to impose for too long.
That's what happens when you retire when you're young.
Yeah, and I want to invite the town administrator, if you have any thoughts, Marie, on this or some other topics on the agenda, please feel free to raise your hand as well and let us know.
Okay.
All right, so I don't see any other hands raised. So why don't we then go on to our next agenda item, which is the budget. And first item is the FY23 budget and then the capital budget, and they're related to each other. So I'll ask Ms. Fagan to give us an update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm going to be bringing some good news to you this evening. First, I'd like to thank Karen Paval, your finance director, for the guidance and help that she provided with trying to balance the fiscal 23 budget. I want to call your attention to the first page, which is the proposed budget. And you will see that it's approximately 3.3% higher than fiscal 22 for about $120,864,768. 786, excuse me. I want to call your attention to the general government section, which is a 7.5% increase. However, in order to balance this rollover budget, I did reduce the selectmen's budget by about $20,000. And on the second page, you will see the general government amounts for all of the departments, which is $4,781,060, which is a 7.5% variance. The election and registration is high. I think I told you at our last meeting, and that is due to the 3 elections and the early voting. That has a huge cost associated with it, and the cities and towns have to bear that cost. You can turn to the next page, the projected revenues. I increased the revenues. Karen and I, Ms. Praval and I sat down yesterday and we went over the revenues, and I was able to increase your pilot projected revenues. I looked at the agreements that you have with the different institutions, and we originally had the that number at 298,000, but I was able to increase to 329,000 because I took a look at all those different agreements, and that is the number that you will be you're receiving in fiscal 22, and you will be receiving that in fiscal 23. So I was able to raise that a little bit. And I raised the fines and forfeits, again, looking at the last few years. So I felt comfortable increasing that by about $4,900. So by increasing the revenue and decreasing the selectmen's budget, I was able to have a shortfall of about $278,500. In speaking with the schools, we took a look at their positions that could potentially be funded out of the opera funds, and that number is $278,500, which allows us to have a balanced rollover level dollar budget. Now, we don't unfortunately have the free cash number yet. Lynn, if you can move to the proposed supplemental priority projects page. We are hoping to get that certified free cash number within the next couple of days. And so I thought for discussion purposes that I would put this slide up so that we could talk, I could get your thoughts on what you would like to do when we do find out what the free cash number is. I thought we could put return some money to the stabilization fund, which you borrowed over the last 2 years. The capital projects, instead of funding them out of the capital account, I thought that we could maybe use free cash for the body cameras in the Guile Field. The election voting equipment, I thought might be a good idea. The school department has some priority needs that I thought we could which are one-time priority needs. So I thought we could use free cash with that. I thought we could fund the OPEB account. That is a future liability number, and we do want to try to consistently each year put some money into that OPEB account. Affordable housing to fund future needs. Animal shelter, because the cost of that shelter keeps rising. Council on Aging, they requested some window blinds and curtains, which is a one-time expense. Fire department, some fire equipment, outdated fire equipment that needs to be replaced. Libraries, some book and materials, which will help them to meet their state mandate on the books and material line. A police cruiser, information technology. We have 4 servers. They are starting to become aged servers, so I would like to replace one of those servers. And then for the planning board, I would suggest a townwide study on open space and recreation. Now, again, these are just my thoughts and my ideas what to do. with the supplemental priorities once we do know the free cash number. So I would like to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fagan. Does anyone have any questions or ideas, especially regarding the supplemental projects for the town administrator? Ms. Fagan, I thought that the list looked good and very comprehensive. It'd be nice if we could fund many, if not all of these. I see Mr. Doyle and then Mr. Wells. Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with your comment. Just two observations. Initially, under the open space and recreation for the planning board, I'm wondering, now that we have a community preservation committee, if the open space and recreation couldn't be covered by the CPC. Second, so that nobody thinks that the window blinds and curtains requested by the COA is merely window dressing. One might note that, if I remember correctly, the originals are in place on a building that is approximately 20 years of age now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Wells and then Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me put my hand down first, so I leave it up there. Thank you, Emma. I mean, I concur with I think this board of members, we did take a good chunk of money out of the table. So I concur with putting that in there. The capital projects the same. Yep. On the election, the town meeting, the COA request, and a lot of those were, some of them actually went up before the capital committee. They just don't meet the criteria, but it doesn't take away from the need and how important they are. So, and the other thing too is Katie, you'll definitely remember being here this morning, and Anne Marie will know from her time before. These are issues that have risen to the surface in the past, a lot of these, and this is one way I think that not only is the town administrator putting forward a balanced budget, or role of a balanced budget, we're able to address some of these important needs that we really are limited in any other ability to do so. So I thank her and Karen for all their hard work on this.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to say thank you to Ms. Fagan and Ms. Praval as well. I agree this is a comprehensive list. I was glad to see that the stabilization fund was on there. I have been concerned because we don't necessarily have a plan in place. Things have been a little fluid with COVID going on, and it's been a challenging time. But I think I need to give this a little more thought, because every one of these is important in its own way, and I don't have specific thoughts at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. And so there is time for people to provide feedback to Ms. Fagan. The Finance Committee is meeting Friday morning, and it's been posted as a meeting with the full board if any of our members would like to be there as well, who are not already on the Finance Committee. So, so we do have some time. Not a lot of time, but we have some time. So, Mr. Wells.
Just a final point. Thank you, Madam Chair, for Ms. Fagan, for the town administrator, Ms. Fagan, is that I think one thing that'll help both of them on this is once they actually do have the number, the actual number, and it will help her to put round pegs in round holes with the ones that need to be addressed here. So she's definitely got a canvas. Well, the four corners of the canvas are all delineated here. It's just how we fill this in. And I think once that question is able to be answered, that's going to really help all of this going forward. So, thank you. Thank you again to both Anne Marie and Karen on this.
I agree. Thank you. Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as an update on where we are on the Finance Committee, what we're looking into with respect to these supplemental needs are primarily two buckets. One, to see where free cash is going to come out, and that will dictate much of what we're able to do with many of these one-time items. And then particularly with respect to the priority needs of the schools, we're looking into what we may be able to do with ARPA funding. And so we had discussions on, I guess it was just yesterday morning, with the school committee about that. I know their finance committee met yesterday, and they'll be with us again on Friday morning to discuss how we might be able to meet a portion of their priority needs, perhaps with using ARPA funding along with the free cash when we know that number. So that's I think, Arthur can fill in, but I think that's what this board may next be seeing is a proposal on how to use free cash with respect to many of these priority projects, and then whether to use ARPA funding to supplement some of the other priority needs.
No further comments beyond one, Mr. Finance Committee Chair, and that is that we want to make sure that for the April 9 Select Board meeting, we have ARPA as a business topic, and then the items specified, we'll have the motions prepared and so on down the line. So thank you, Michael.
Okay, anything else on this item? And Ms. Praval, if you have anything you'd like to add, please feel free. Does anyone have anything else before we move on to capital? Mr. Doyle.
Just one thing, Madam Chair, could a copy of this be sent to each of us so that we have the update?
Yes, in fact, I think it was.
It already has. It's there. It's there.
So it's
It was sent out this afternoon.
Okay, I must have missed it. I'll dig for it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All right. Then.
5:13 this afternoon.
Hopefully we will hear in the next few days on the free cash number.
All right. Well, thank you to Ms. Fagan and Ms. Praval and Assistant Superintendent Amy Dexter, who's been helping as well with questions from the DOR and the free cash process. So we're grateful for all of your efforts there. Hopefully we'll have something very soon. All right, for number 6, and actually before we move on to that, I had meant to mention at the top of our meeting that I was going to ask the board to defer 2 items. So if there is anyone who's watching our meeting or in the attendee group who was here for the East Milton Library, the Art Center bid, or the Governor Stoughton item 2, the Affordable Housing Trust request, I'd like to ask the board to defer both of those. We have some additional items that are needed to be done before we can consider the lease for the East Milton Library, and some information we're waiting on from Town Council, as well as from the Affordable Housing Trust regarding the Governor Stoughton item. So if that's agreeable to everyone, and we can, when we get to those items in the agenda, we can officially defer them, but I just wanted to make that request of everyone. And I intended to do it at the beginning of the meeting, but forgot to write myself a note. So my apologies. So let's move on to item 6, the Capital Improvement Committee. Do we still, I think we still probably need to get the free cash certification before we can act on that, given that we may want to consider using some of it for the items that were proposed to be expended from the Capital Stabilization Fund. So Ms. Fagan and Ms. Praval, is that, Mr. Wells, is that your understanding?
Madam Chair. Go on.
Go ahead.
Ms. Praval?
Madam Chair, so we were looking for approval for ARPA funds for a couple of projects, but yes, we would have to wait on the free cash, but we wanted to also, as Ms. Fagan mentioned on the PowerPoint screen of the different projects that they'd like to use if free cash numbers come in. On that form were capital projects, so we wouldn't have to take use the Capital Stabilization Fund for a couple of capital projects, if that could also be funded through free cash, depending on when that number comes in.
So do you want to do the ARPA ones tonight, or should we
Yes.
put all of those off? Should that be Friday morning or our next meeting?
Tonight, I think, Madam Chair. Am I right, Karen?
Yes. Yes,
The ARPA funds, okay.
I can share my screen.
Oh, thank you.
Madam Chair, the projects that we're the Capital Committee is requesting is $400,000 to be used from ARPA funds to cover a portion of the Lower Guile Field reconstruction project. And $110,000 for the town hall chiller plant replacement, and HVAC system upgrades at the library. These are all eligible items that are covered through the American Rescue Plan Act, and we would like to ask approval to move these forward for funding.
Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, these are all items that have been recommended by the Finance Committee as well.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion?
I would make it, but I'm chair of capital, so I probably shouldn't.
Oh, you can if you want,
All
Richard.
right, I'll make the motion to approve these projects as articulated by the chief financial officer.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Then all in favor. Mr. Doyle.
Yes.
Mr. Zulus.
Yes, and I would note that Karen got a promotion from Richard.
I call that all the time. I do it all. It's just, she's a chief. Don't anyone think for a second she's not.
Right. Ms. Collins.
Yes.
And Mr. Wells.
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right, thank you. Thank you to both Ms. Fagan and Ms. Praval for both of those reports and items. Okay, right, so is there anything else on the Finance Committee or the budget before we move on? Okay. All right, next meeting. The next item on our agenda is an update on the East Milton, well, 3 projects, the East Milton Deck Project, Randolph Avenue and Chickatawba Road intersection, and Oak Street. And this stems from a tour and some presentations and information provided by Department of Transportation officials that Senator Timilty invited all of us to I think it was last Monday or Tuesday. We had very little notice of this, so we weren't able to actually post this as a notice of the select board. It was actually the Chamber of Commerce was invited. There were several members of the public as well as many representatives of the state. And I wanted to ask Mr. Doyle or Mr. Zulus in particular if they wanted to give any update on this. My understanding initially was there was going to be a tour of different sites, and I did go to the deck, but I did not make it to the other stops. And just wanted to give an update for the general public. I did not really hear the discussion because I went over talking to the chief and the deputy chief of police about some other things. So Mr. Doyle or Mr. Zulus, is there any news that you'd like to share, or just give a report on Senator Timilty's offer to, and Representative Driscoll was also present, and many town officials. So is there anything you'd like to report on that was said at any of these stops? Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank Senator Timilty for this initiative and Representative Driscoll for being present. Senator Timilty invited the Massachusetts Secretary of Transportation to be at this meeting where he heard firsthand from the public as well as from some select board comments, issues associated with the deck, the need for good communications, in particular, information about the under bidding work that is being done on the deck and its impact upon the schedule. And it was my recollection, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody else heard it, that completion is now scheduled for the month of October. It was very clear from people who spoke with the secretary that the condition of the deck is not acceptable. It does not meet the expectations and standards of either the town of Milton or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that the work should be as expeditiously completed to the highest of standards possible.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. I saw some Facebook posts that referred to October, so it sounds like that's accurate. Did that sound like that was firm, or did that sound like that was tentative? Maybe
he didn't back away from that date. That sounded like the schedule.
Okay, yeah. 'Cause
Madam Chair?
long ago, we were told the summer, so that was, yes, Mr. Wolf. We have Mr. Zulus' hand raised. Did you want
Oh,
to?
go ahead. I'm
follow
sorry.
up?
I couldn't even see it in the white, so I apologize. Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead. I apologize.
Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Richard. So, so Arthur's right. That's what I thought really the headline was, which is they had told us just a couple of weeks before that the outside date was July, and then all of a sudden, last Wednesday, the outside date now is moved to October, which is a year and a half later than the latest projected date initially. So, as Arthur pointed out, there was a lot of dissatisfaction. There's a lot of dissatisfaction that was made clear to the Secretary Tesla about the timing of the project, about the condition, about the lack of work that was being done on the project, and the condition of not only the site itself, but around the site and the dangers in the sidewalks for Milton residents. And so Secretary Tesla was very gracious, listened, and had other individuals there from DOT, Ann McKay, and hopefully they'll take the steps to put more resources on this and make sure that it's done, as Arthur said, make sure that this is done appropriately and in a more timely way. And I can tell you, we then went down to, I don't know if you want me to talk about the other two sites. I know Arthur was at Chickatobit and Randolph. Then I don't know.
Could you hold on the other two? And because
Sure.
I have
Yeah,
them.
absolutely.
Let me see if Mr. Wells might have had a comment on the deck specifically when we cover this one. And we also had a resident tonight who spoke at Citizen Speak about the.
I can wait till Michael's done. Chair, that's fine.
Do you want to talk about the square, Richard, or?
Yeah, it was the square, but I can wait until Michael's done. I'm fine.
All right, Mr. Zulus.
So from the square, and again, as Martha noted, there was a lot of dissatisfaction expressed there, but the secretary was very gracious in spending the entire morning throughout Milton. We went down to the intersection of Oak and Blue Hill Ave, down in the neighborhood of the Tucker School, and there were residents there and members of the Milton Police Department expressing the concerns about the neighborhood there, in that the traffic goes much too fast. There's poor lighting, there's poor signage, and it is a school zone, if not technically a school zone. And so cars that are speeding along Blue Hill Ave don't know that there's a school right up Oak Street. So there was there were concerns expressed by the residents who live in the area about their children being able to cross the street, not having the lighting, not having the crosswalks, not having the opportunity to cross in a safe way. And the secretary and the members of the Department of Transportation were coming up with a lot of thoughts and ideas about better signage, better lighting, as we were speaking. And so I think there was a lot of good exchange there, and hopefully it'll lead to something, because this is a state road over which the secretary has authority, and hopefully that they'll be able to help in making this safer for the residents, and particularly the children in that area. And then we went to the intersection of Chickatobit and Randolph, and talked about the dangers of that intersection that have been well discussed. And as we know, DOT, Department of Transportation, had presented an initial plan of creating a roundabout about 2 years ago, or a little more than 2 years ago, before the pandemic. And so there was some discussion there with residents about the benefits and detriments, potential detriments of a roundabout and alternatives to a roundabout, and whether you could move the roundabout up towards Randolph. And again, the members of the Transportation Department and the Secretary listened, asked a lot of questions, provided some answers to the residents and others who asked questions, and pledged to take all that back as they develop their plan to make the 7th most dangerous intersection, at least as of 2 years ago, 7th most dangerous intersection in Massachusetts, hopefully more safe in providing some resources and reconfiguring it. So that was the end of the morning. But again, I think the secretary brought, I want to say maybe 7 to 10 people they had 2 vans from the Department of Transportation, listening, answering questions, asking questions, and answering some questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lewis. Mr. Wells.
Chair, let's get these all unmuted and down. So just to follow up on the square, as you know, I've pressed very hard on this, on the earmark and the money on the potential pavilion to be placed on the northwest corner, facing from Adams and Granite, looking up towards Cunningham School. Good news is Rich Howard from Harrison has provided Chase with a couple of preliminary designs, and they are doing as much as they can to get the preliminary work that is done now while they're working in that area, the electricity, the wiring, the pad, whatever goes in there. It will require more money, and Representative Driscoll has stated that he will try to get another $100,000 this year, go towards it. So hopefully that is something that when this project is finally done, we have enough money and the ability to do it. He does have, I think, 4 preliminary designs that he's going to wait to come to us till he kind of narrows it down to 1 or 2 for us to take a look at. But they are very nice. I did see a couple, and they are very nice. So he is working hard on that, and I'm grateful that that part of this project is not being forgotten, because that's being forgotten, as I said before. We don't want to be talking about this 5 years from now and have it not be done on the deck. So thank you for that.
Some of us definitely won't be talking about this 5 years from now.
Yeah. And as the Mr. just to the 138 and Oak Street, it's a historical point. Crossing guards in the town, for as long as I can remember, least sought, hardest position to fill, because it's just this parking on 138 there, it's just such a tough intersection. That is a true challenge, trying to cross children each morning, even with all the detours and safety precautions were put in on Oak Street itself over the years. That's definitely a very important intersection that most people would not even think of unless they experience it every day. So thank you for that, too. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's it.
Well, maybe I missed the email, but I don't think I've seen the designs for the gazebo.
No, you haven't. No, he hasn't. He just, only because I've been pressing him. So after we left the square, I went to him that day, and he just happened to tell me, because he had been,
okay.
Actually, they said to us, that's where it came from. When they were here presenting, I don't know whether it was Bridget or one of the others mentioned that they had been working with Chase, so I didn't let that slip. I pursued it, and it is true they are working on it. So,
all right. Well, maybe we can get those from Mr. Berkeley and circulate those to the board to look at. Thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 footnotes on the Chickatawbut, the site visit. One was recognition of the fact that this is positioned in a metropolitan area, and all that a metropolitan area represents, noting that there's a cloverleaf just a mile or 2 from that intersection going toward Randolph, exiting traffic from one of the busiest highways in the Commonwealth. But more importantly, neighbors spoke about the need of the advisability of having additional stoplights on Randolph Avenue between Chickatawbut and the DPW yard, with the public noting that intervention breaks up the flow and the speed of traffic. This is something that I've seen in other parts of the country. And I think that's a point that I hope they took under a serious consideration, in that the town of Milton will look at very, very seriously and continue to press on. Exiting from some of the streets, whether it's Hillside or others, is a very serious matter. The acceleration from intersections is very, very serious, with people not understanding that this is not a superhighway that they have just come off of, with only one traffic signal to interfere until they get almost to St. Elizabeth's Church. I think there's one light before St. Elizabeth's.
All right, well, thank you for making all those stops. It sounds like it might have taken all morning to visit the various locations. So any other comment or questions? All right, then thank you all. Item 8 is the warrant for the annual town election that Mr. Napoli and the town clerk's office have been working on. We have a revised version that has just a couple of typo corrections. Would anyone like to?
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the warrant for the annual town election.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Yeah. Mr. You may have said yes. I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zulus.
Yes.
Ms. Collins.
Yes.
Mr. Wells.
Mr. Minute, what are we voting, Madam Chair? I'm sorry, I just stepped away for a second.
The annual town election warrant.
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right. Item 9, March 2022 special town meeting. We usually put a discussion of town meeting on our agendas after a town meeting, just if there's anything we want to follow up on or have any kind of a breakdown session. I know we have a lot of other things on the agenda tonight. It's a little after 8. Is there anything that anyone would like to discuss? And as I said, we could always take it up at another time if there's anything we want to bring up. If not, we'll move on to the annual town meeting. Mr. Zulus.
Madam Chair, maybe if we have a lot on the agenda, maybe we put it on for another evening. I know there was a lot of dissatisfaction that has been expressed by town meeting members, but we can discuss that on another evening if we have a packed agenda for tonight.
I leave it up to the board. Is there would anyone like to have a discussion about the special town meeting in the last week?
Madam Chair, I would agree with Mr. Zulus to have it on a future town meeting.
Okay.
I've heard from a number of citizens along the lines that Mr. Zulus spoke of with respect to comments he received from town meeting members, and I've heard nothing satisfactory commented on the March town meeting.
Okay. All right.
Other than the articles, I think 1 and 4.
Yes, and 3, the Elliott Street. Okay, so we'll put that on one of the April agendas. Thank you. Annual town meeting. So we need. I see that the moderator has joined us. Why don't we move Mr. Hiss up to handle us? Mr. Hiss is here mainly for the electronic voting discussion, but we are going to have to schedule the new date. So why don't we ask Mr. Hiss to join us for that? Just for the public's benefit, at town meeting and at our meeting just an hour prior to town meeting, we had talked about some different dates. We were looking at Monday, March 16th, or Monday, May 16th or May 23rd. And I believe it was the warrant committee that indicated that May 16th was better than the 23rd for them. But we have some various dates that the high school auditorium is available. So let's first welcome to Mr. Hiss. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Bob, for your information, we had one resident, Deborah Felton, who was at our public comment tonight, who asked about precautions that would be taken at an in-person town meeting with respect to masks and vaccination and everyone being gathered at the high school auditorium. So we don't need to answer that tonight, but that's just something that was raised to us at public comment. But the dates that we that the high school is available among some others, and we haven't yet obtained any June dates, would be May 16th and 18th, the 23rd, the 24th, and the 26th. So there are 5 dates that are broken up a little bit. The first week will be a Monday and a Wednesday, and then the second week of town meeting would be a Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, the normal schedule that we usually followed, if we were to select those dates. So Bob, Jennifer, if you have any thoughts, I know you said you're available on those dates. If you have any preference or any thoughts, or if any member of the board has any thoughts.
Madam Chair, just a quick question, if I may. Are those sites, dates rather, being reserved by the high school at this time?
I know we've inquired about them. I don't know if they're booked yet.
Because we don't want to lose them. I have lost any of them.
Yes. I'm hopeful that, yeah, it was just within the last couple of days we asked about them and they were available. So depending on where we are tonight, we should probably confirm it quickly with the high school.
Thank you.
So Bob, any thoughts on the dates?
Yeah, I think if it helps the select board to have it be the 16th, and that works for the warrant committee. If we did those dates and it ended up going 5 nights, it would only be the Thursday would be the only one that would extend beyond what we would normally do, ending on the Tuesday of the 24th. So it's only 2 calendar days and 1 extra day beyond that normal window. So to me, that seems like reasonable for the town meeting members.
Yeah, I know the 26th is right before the Memorial Day. Just put my calendar out, the Memorial Day weekend, but
it's the Thursday, right?
Thursday. So some people might have long range plans, but to be away for a few days. But that no matter what dates we pick, there's going to be conflicts. Mr. Napoli, did you have some information for us?
I did. I just checked the email from Karen at the school department, and the 26th is not available.
Okay, I thought that was on the available list, so maybe that's changed. Okay. Well, but we at least have the first 4 dates, and it's not often that town meeting goes to 6 nights or even 5 nights. Ms. Fagan, did you have your hand raised? I thought I saw another hand.
Madam Chair, yes. The dates available are the 16th, 18th, 23rd, 24th, and 25th, not 26th.
25th, okay. All right, then I must have had the email wrong. So that would be the second week would be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Wells.
I know I'm going back in history here, but would it be prudent for us to look at the Pierce as well? I mean, that was the home to town meeting for many decades. If we need, if we had to. Because I think one of the challenges with the high school is, as you're getting near the end of the year, there are just so many events, scholarship nights, awards, so many things they're trying to cram in their own schedule. I had seen an email from the moderator the other day about other possible locations. Which made me think of this afterwards, that it is big enough to hold town meeting if you had to.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's something I thought about the other day too. I just haven't been in that auditorium.
Oh, I have. It's very nice.
Would it be big enough to accommodate town meeting?
It's the same size as it always was, except it's redone. It's a new. It has the same bells and whistles as the auditorium does at the high school.
Yeah. Okay. I saw it during the school building project when the building was complete, but that's several years ago now, so I couldn't really remember how big it was. Mr. Zulus.
I was just there weekend before last, and it was part of a capacity crowd. I was there 3 days in a row. But it seemed, I don't know what the capacity is. It seems a little smaller than the Winchester Auditorium in the high school. But I think, to Rich's point, I don't know what the capacity is, but I think it probably would work. But
I think it's 500 versus 700. The high school's 775, okay. And I think the Pierce is 500.
Okay.
All right, and this with a little under 300 town meeting members, 270 or 280 town meeting members. So that should
You were the one, Madam Chair, who used to talk about going to town meeting with, was it with your father on Saturdays?
Oh, yeah, no, I've been at the old,
Yeah.
the
The old
old
one,
high
yeah.
school, now the middle school auditorium there, when I remember when a town meeting was there, but just not having been in there in a long time. I wanted to be sure. Bob, any thoughts did you have on the middle school versus the high school? You know, at MATV, that's another issue, whether MATV might be able to televise on there.
Well,
Well,
that's
I
their home
think,
base right there.
um,
Sorry, Bob.
no, it's quite all right. Yeah, I think cable access is all, they know how to go work the room for the high school. I think there would also be something about going back, if we're going to go back, if COVID permits us, going back to the high school, which is kind of going back home, so to speak, might be a nice touch. And so on, the only thing we'd lose is if we had a 3-night meeting, it would roll into a Monday as opposed to being done on a Thursday. If it was a 4-night meeting, we're going to be in the other week anyways, and it's in 5 nights, there's only, you know, we finish on Wednesday versus Tuesday. So, and I think also if people are worried about distancing, having, you know, 40% more in the high school with 200 extra seats, as Mr. Wells points out, might make people more comfortable.
And you never know how many members of the general public might show up. You know, usually there are some non-town meeting members who attend.
Right. The town clerk tells me that typically the first night we get about 265 members, and then it drops off night by night. So that would give you, you know, kind of a third of the space occupied by the members, and maybe another 50 show up who are citizens, perhaps. So you would have a lot of room to spread out if you could do it in the high school.
All right, so it sounds like the high school is preferred for some reasons, although it's a good point, Mr. Wells, to consider Pierce. So are we looking, is the 16th, is that the night we're gonna look towards? I mean, we're still waiting on free cash to be certified, but we're very hopeful that very soon we'll have that number, and that still gives us, if, you know, we still have a full month of April. We'd want to get we need to get the warrants into the printer sometime in mid to late April to get this to, it would need to be to the town meeting members and generally publicly available. We're not going to mail it to households anymore, but it still needs to be publicly available 7 days before town meeting. So, and it's still a fair amount of time to finalize the budget, get the warrant committee's recommendations and comments all written in the report. Time for the warrant to be prepared and approved. All right, so it looks like we're targeting those dates, the 16th, 18th, 23rd, 24th, and 25th.
Madam Chair, we will call and reserve those dates tomorrow with high school.
Thank you. All right, since we have Mr. Hiss here, we could jump ahead to, we have a few different categories under this item, but we have all of the non-budget articles listed, and one of them is the electronic voting article. And that's what Mr. Hiss would like to meet with us about tonight. So Bob, why don't I turn it over to you? We'll talk about that. We'll come back to the Woodlot Road item and the other items.
Okay, thank you. So as a refresher, I formed an electronic voting committee, I think in 2019. They came back with a favorable opinion, but suggested deferring it until the select board thought the finances would make it more affordable. Since that time, I've reconvened a subset of the committee. We've gone back to the vendors, of which there were 3 that are the most popular amongst the roughly 35 or so towns in the Commonwealth that have electronic voting. We've received quotes from all 3. They range from rental options, which are pretty popular with the open town meetings because they can have a highly variable attendance. You know, they could get 100 people at one and 5,000 at another, versus the representative town meetings where there's about a 50-50 split between rental and owning. When I met with Mr. Zulus and Mr. Doyle, was it 2 months ago? They asked some follow-up questions. So I surveyed the towns that had purchased or rented and asked them, had anyone regretted their decision either way? And the answer came back, not regret, but there was a case where a rental town went to a purchase town because they were renting to try, and then they decided they liked it, so they went and they bought the technology. There was another case where a town bought a refresh of the technology after about 5 or 6 years. Other than that, there was no dissatisfaction with either the vendor they had or the business model, the rental versus ownership model. So I put together, in terms of costs, because that was the thing that held back the voting committee, the committee last time, I put together some numbers with kind of a worst case, best case, and maybe expected case. And I think the numbers clearly come out. Owning is less expensive for the town. We'd buy about, call it 300 sets, specifically 289, but about 300 of these handsets, and there's some central software. The other cost is we'd have to have town employees staffing up the night. So probably 2 IT folks from a combination of either schools, library, or town hall. I understand, I talked to Rob Mallett, who said, for example, when he got paid overtime for helping us town meeting when we were running on Zoom. He said it was about $500 in overtime for a town meeting. So I put that in the model. And so, for example, the worst case on 5 years for an ownership model would be about just under 32 grand for the cost of the equipment, the one-time cost, and then the overtime to run the meeting. And then the best case might be as low as 19 grand, and the expected case is about 26, 27 grand. So we're probably looking at 26 or 27 grand over 5 years. The expected case kind of 14 and a half up front, as much as 16 and a half up front. And then the only thing you get on that ownership model over the next 2 to 5 years is the variable time of the IT staff. There's no follow-on cost from the ownership model. If we did a rental, they range from over 5 years, 100 grand in the worst case, to 55 grand in the best case, to 75 grand in the expected case over those 5 years, because you pay for a setup on every meeting and then a marginal cost for every night. So the rental option is you get flexibility, but you don't put any drain on your staff, but you pay for it with that model. And I think since the reason that a lot of the representative town meetings do the ownership, because they have a fixed number of people they're going to expect every meeting. And they don't have to have the surge capacity. So they don't have to buy 5,000 and use 200 on one night. They just buy the number they need and they're good to go. So that's kind of the pitch and data so far. Happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for following up on the questions from the earlier conversation. Most appreciated, and for the very clear analysis that you provided. It certainly helped me make a judgment as to the direction that I would like to take, which is to move in the direction of ownership over rental for the town of Milton. You're muted, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bob. This is great, and it clearly makes the case that ownership is the best financial case here. Ownership is 19,000 to 31,000, and renting is 55 to 100. So there's just no issue on the financial case. And I think now is the time to move on this, because we've been doing electronic voting for 2 years. People are used to it. They have bought in, and by necessity, they bought in. But I think not to do it would be to move backward at this point. So I think the time is right. I think you've done a great job on this, and the certainly made the financial case. So to the extent that we can find that amount, which is not a not a huge amount. We can find that in free cash for this year. It may be a good use for that. So.
Bob, I have a question just procedurally as to how it works, because we've talked a lot about it, but it's been a while and we haven't been in the in-person meetings. So I know that we're able to get the percentages of the vote. So as soon as we vote electronically, we all see the screen that comes up showing, it was 75% in favor and the number opposed and 2 abstained. When we're back in person and we're voting electronically, this would eliminate it, I think, but I could be wrong, the need for standing vote. So if there's a vote, we have the percentage, then that usually standing vote challenges whether the moderator heard the voices correctly. Would it also eliminate the need for a roll call vote, or would that still be an option if enough town meeting members challenged a vote that was, say, overwhelmingly 80, 90% who were in favor of something? Would there still potentially be a roll call vote, or does it eliminate that hour-long process. Not that it happens often, but it has happened a number of times over the years.
It would eliminate it because the handheld devices are assigned to individuals. So you get, handheld device number one goes to Ms. Conlon. And so the system would track how Ms. Conlon voted. And so procedurally, we could decide how much information we wanted to share during the town meeting. We could just put up the totals in case it was challenged, or we could put up the complete list of all 289 members and how they voted plus the totals. And of course, we'd have a complete record for the annual report. We'd have instant results the next day to put on the town website that we don't have today. That is very laborious for the clerk to assemble even the final counts. She needs till the annual report in order to put all the totals together because she's got a lot on her plate. So you get a lot of data we wouldn't have.
Okay, and just one other question. Would it be a matter of when people when town meeting members are arriving at the auditorium, they would be given the device then, and then as they leave town meeting, they would have to turn it back in so that we don't have a situation where we've only bought 289 of them and then 10 people forget it the second night to bring it with them. It would stay at the auditorium or with the town officials and be distributed each night to somebody without, I see you nodding. And with that, does that create any problems with identifying the person with the device?
Well, they'd have to check in now. So we'd have to work out with the clerk. Now, we ask members to sign in. Now they would sign in and we would register their device number with their name upon check-in. And the same thing would have to happen at checkout. And with the checkout, we also we eliminate the quorum call. Remember we had that about 3 years ago, late at night? We now know we've got 145 votes or not right there.
So that might actually mean people from the clerk's office or other town employees being at the entrances and exits so that if somebody leaves at 9 o'clock and the town meeting is still going on, that person needs to return their device and check out. And you can still track the quorum, but we know that they've left at a certain period of time.
Yes, I think that'd be one of the functions of probably the IT staff is check in, check out. And then the clerk is doing the normal duties of making sure that these are valid town meeting members and that they're the only ones that have gotten the devices, but the physical management we could give to the IT team.
Okay, thank you for that refresher. That's good information. Mr. Wells and then Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I agree with Mr. Zulus took my initial comments right out is that Zoom kind of did this for us. The utilization of Zoom the past 2 years has showed us exactly how this will work as far as the voting. The second thing is, this is more for Anne Marie. I think based on the price, we're going to either have to go with 3 quotes or potentially, what was the high number you gave? Bob, what was the highest number you gave?
Upfront purchase was 15.5. It may go up a little bit. That was a month ago, but in that range for the highest ownership price.
We might be all right there then. Yeah, Emery, I'm just thinking about the potential of either have to get quotes or going out to bid. That's something you want to start sooner versus later if you have to do that. I can't remember what the ceiling is right now. You may be within the 3 quote range and don't have to go up to bid. Is it a 25,000, Emery, not to go up to bid? Or under 25?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I will speak with the procurement officer tomorrow.
That's just the one thing that we may have to address as far as getting what you need and how, as well as Mike Zulus said, finding the money to do it.
Just to that point, before we go to Ms. Collins, Richard, is, we'd be voting on this in May for the following, probably for as early as
Special.
October. Yeah, probably the October town meeting. So there'd be some time to review the bidding requirements and what we have to do. And this is really just the appropriation that we'd be seeking at this stage. So at least there's time to deal with those issues you've raised. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Moderator Hiss. I just have a couple of questions, one of which is, you may have mentioned this in previous reports because I realize your committee's been working on this for a while, but I agree, hands down, purchase seems like the right way to go. I was just curious about the longevity of this equipment, if any other cities and towns let you know how long the equipment lasts.
I only found 2 towns that repurchased because this didn't start until 2014. So we're within let's say technology might have a 5-year lifespan. We're within that 10-year period still. Now, it's not terribly complex, sophisticated software. It's a fairly simple device with 3 buttons on it, yes, no, abstain. It's in a closed network. It'll have a receiving piece of equipment, like the radio that'll pick up the signals. And then there's the software that runs enclosed on a server. So, but there'll probably be a repurchase we would be facing in 5 years from now, should the town vote to proceed.
Thank you. And my other question is, thank you, Ms. Conlon, for your questions. And I was just wondering how it seems like a policy decision about when and how which information is shared, given what kinds of votes or circumstances town meeting finds itself in. So I was just wondering, you do such a great job with the consent agenda, you know, laying that out and helping people understand. And I was wondering about who decides and creates the policy around when each vote is like a roll call vote. It obviously, if you have to have a roll call vote, that information is available, but for just a typical vote or something like that, when would names be shared and things like that? I think people will be curious. Thank you.
By the way, other towns have implemented this differently. Some use voice vote for what they perceive to be as routine matters. For example, like the consent agenda, because no one challenges the consent agenda, just the whole process leads you to a real strong majority. And then they put it on budget articles or 2/3 votes articles. Other towns record votes by member and some don't. And our committee 3 years ago did interview some town meeting members, and there are some uncomfortable with their vote being recorded, which I find difficult to swallow given the representative town meeting nature, but it'll be up to the town meeting members, I think, to adopt a policy, because and we could do it 2 ways. I wrote the article vaguely to just adopt electronic voting, and then we could have just a consent of the meeting, or a practice could evolve about how we implement it to avoid amendment after amendment on how we're going to go implement the adoption of technology.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments for the moderator? And there are a couple of articles here, right? One is the appropriation, the other is adopting the electronic voting. So I believe our board is the one that had submitted both of these articles on behalf of the moderator and his committee. They looked at electronic voting. So they're in the warrant. The warrant committee had a brief discussion, some questions really about the status of it. And I responded to the warrant committee Monday night that we were waiting on this cost information. We would get it to them as soon as possible. So I think we should provide the information that Bob has given us to the warrant committee, and we may want to be prepared to go in and talk with them next week or so, whenever the next meeting is about this. I think they're meeting tonight, actually.
Yeah, Madam Chair, they asked me if I wanted to come in or could come in, and they suggested Monday, the 28th. So I'll go in your convenience with you, or if you'd rather go present this as the submitting body, I'm fine to step back.
Well, you've done a lot of the work on this, Bob, you and your committee, so I think would be great if you're there to discuss it with them. And we haven't yet posted it's Wednesday night, so we still have time to post for Monday night if the whole board wants to go. We probably should post for the board to be at the warrant committee anyway, just in case we have more than 2 members there.
They're going to host it via Zoom, they said, by the way.
Okay. All right. All right, that's great. So anything else on this item? I think that was the only item you were joining us for this evening, Bob, was this item.
That's great.
Okay, then thank you very much.
All right, thank you for the time.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Chair? I would just say, you know, I understand we needed to defer our debrief on the special town meeting discussion, but I just ask that we invite the moderator for our discussion of that on the 6th.
Okay.
Yeah, happy to attend.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank
Bye.
you. All right, so let's go back to Woodlock Drive article. We have a slightly revised draft in our meeting materials of this article, and the change really related to just be clarifying that we could take the fee interest as or an easement. So we just want to vote tonight to substitute the latest version that Mr. Zawinski and Town Council have been working on in place of the original draft of the article. And I believe the warrant committee has received the latest draft, but if not, we'll get it to them right away.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to, go ahead, Arthur.
You go finish up and I'll second you.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept the revised version of Woodlock Drive as a public way.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor. Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. We also have a request from the Bylaw Review Committee to withdraw their article relative to the recodification of the zoning bylaws. And I understand from the planning director, and also an email that we received from Alex Whiteside, who's a member of that committee, in response to a question from the building inspector. This is the new codification is a very lengthy document, and they want to withdraw it now so that there can be an educational outreach and an explanation to town meeting members that they don't think there'd be time for at the May meeting, and also to figure out how something this lengthy is going to be publicized and provided to town meeting members in advance. So this is a request from the committee that submitted the article to withdraw it.
Madam Chair, I'll move to withdraw the zoning bylaw recodification article from the annual town meeting warrant.
Mr. Doyle.
Madam Chair, a question with two parts.
Let's just see if we have a second first so we can discuss this.
Fine.
Did anyone want a second? I'll second the motion. Mr. Doyle then.
Madam Chair, I was wondering, two-part legal question. Is the town open to any liabilities, do we know, based upon the status of these bylaws at the present time? And second, is there any legality with this situation? Is the town compelled to have their bylaws intact and in place within a certain period of time? Has that come into discussion at all? Do you know? Or can we
I think, Mr. Doyle, we'd have to refer both of those questions to town council. You know, and this has been the status for a long time, that we don't have one easy place to go and look for all of the zoning bylaws. So it's a problem for town, you know, it's a problem for Joe Prondick as well as for the general public and developers and members of boards. But it's been a problem for a while. So I think delaying it until October, if that's their plan, is frustrating, but probably not going to add additional. We should refer your question to town council for a future discussion.
That would be fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wells.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just kind of follow. Did I not see a very strongly worded email from the building inspector on this issue today?
Yes. I think he seemed to be of the belief that we were withdrawing it, but I responded to him to let him know that this is the committee that submitted the article that wants to review it, and that those are the reasons that Mr. Zawinski informed us and Alex Whiteside responded that the bylaw review committee is looking for an effective and official way to inform town meeting members and to publicize this hundreds of pages, I think was what was in the email from Alex. So it's something that the planning board and our board and others should really prioritize so that this can get done in October. But
was he okay? Was he okay with that?
Well, Mr. Prondick's been dealing with this for several years.
I know he has. That's why it's very rare to get such a strong email as we did today from him. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, he would like the town meeting to move forward with all due haste to get this done.
I could tell. Okay, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All right, so do we have any discussion on the motion? All in favor, Mr. Doyle?
No.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes, but Madam Chair, may I just say that I'm very disappointed about this. Thank you.
Mr. Wells?
I'm a no as well, Madam Chair.
I'm going to vote yes. I understand the frustration, but this is a moderator appointed committee that wants to withdraw their own article, and I don't think the board should not withdraw it if the submitting authority wants to remove it. But I completely agree with the frustration and suggested to Mr. Pondek that we need to, we'll do whatever we can to try to move this forward. And obviously that's going to mean the new select board moving it forward and working with the planning board and the bylaw review committee. Okay, we have other town meeting articles on our agenda in case we want to have any discussion of them. So I know the warrant committee's already voted at least a couple of these. We've had some discussion. We haven't voted all of them for a position on them. For anyone who did not see the planning board meeting last week, the citizen article regarding the temporary apartments, the planning board voted to recommend that that article be sent, not back, but referred for study to the planning board. Largely because a lot of the same issues were raised as the accessory dwelling unit article that was referred to the planning board at last week's town meeting. And Cheryl Tagayas at the last planning board meeting mentioned the possibility of the planning board tomorrow night discussing another article relating to accessory dwelling units. I don't know whether they're going to do that or not. So she did ask me whether there would be time to get an article into the warrant, and I indicated that because we're pushing town meeting back a couple of weeks, there may be a very short window. But we'll have to see what they do tomorrow evening.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Wells.
Just given the timeliness in the, particularly for both you and Ms. Collins, do you want to try and get some of these done tonight? Take a vote on some of these tonight just to get them done, because we are going to be limited in time as far as meetings going forward with this board that we have intact right now. It's up to you. I'm ready to do it. I'm just bringing up as a point to you.
Yeah, I mean, we could. The only thing is maybe that the new board then wants to, revote some of them. That would be, be one thing to think about. Mr. Zulus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Richard's point, the Municipal Broadband Committee presented to the Warrant Committee on Monday night on the municipal light plant article, and Warrant Committee unanimously recommended in favor of it. We can have that presentation to this board if this board would like. It's about a 7 or 8 minute presentation. So if this board wants to, this board thinks it'd be helpful, we can do that. And then I believe it was the week before, the school building committee made a presentation to the select board on the land swap. And I know the chair of that committee has also been in front of the conservation commission as well. And so we can have that presentation to this board as well, if the members would like.
Okay, so we could schedule those if we'd like to hear from those committees to present to this board.
The school one's a little longer. The municipal broadband, again, 7 or 8 minutes. School one, I think, was about 12 to 14.
Well, if it makes sense, we could split them between the 6th and the 13th and do one night and the other another night. I mean, I'm open to Mr. Wells' suggestion, but the thing is, if the board is going to be asked for its position at town meeting, town meeting members, I think, are going to be focused on the then present board, which will not have 2 of the current members on it. So it may be that, we could vote to weigh in on some of them, but it may be that the board's going to have to take another vote anyway. So we'll defer to what everyone else, what the majority wants to do here.
I think that's an awful steep, for given a brand new board with 2 members that have never had any experience here at all. That's an awful steep climb to do 1, 2, 3, almost 10 to weigh in and vote on 10 items that they've never been associated. I'm just a thought. I'm willing to vote and get whatever we can do. I'm ready to vote the light plant now. I'm all good to go.
All right, let's go to Ms. Collins because her hand is raised. Let's see what her thought is.
I appreciate that. I'd be happy to vote. I do think that this happens every time you get a new member because you get elected and then you get tossed into town meeting. So I do think too, the members who are remaining will do an excellent job of educating the new people. But I'm happy to vote, but I think you may be re-voting.
Well, there may be a couple of simpler ones, like the Master Plan Implementation Committee's increased in size. The Warrant Committee's already voted to recommend that. If that's agreeable to everybody, we could vote that one. And I think, I don't recall offhand, I have to ask Mr. Zulus whether the municipal broadband article involves bonding. As if it does, I'm going to recuse myself on that aspect of it.
No money, Madam Chair.
Okay.
We're not asking for any money from town meeting.
All
It's
right,
a
good.
ministerial article to set up options for the possibility of broadband competition for Comcast and RCN. So it's just creating an option, not asking for any money, whatever at this point. It's no, to be serious, what it is the second vote. There's the legislation requires 2 votes within 13 months. Town meeting voted last May in favor of this by a vote, I think it was about 86%. And the legislation requires an identical second vote within 13 months. So this will be the second vote in order to establish the MLP, not to fund it, only to provide the option to move forward and seek options for a subscriber-based model of municipal internet. So I probably gave you more than you wanted on that, but could give you a lot more. And I would say on the new people, we'll still have a majority of the people who are on the board.
Right.
That's true. But I was thinking if we're not unanimous on some of them, it may be that those particularly have to revote. But
I was kidding. Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Wells.
So, well, we'll see where this goes. So I'll be willing to make a motion that we approve item 2, item 3, item 5, item 6, and item 10. And I'll repeat, so 2 is electronic voting, 3 is municipal broadband light plant, 5 is the increased membership of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, 6 is the Milton Cemetery Revolving Fund, which is just a formality to help them. And then I jumped down all the way to item 10, which is the stormwater appropriation.
I think the stormwater one, if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Fagan, I think that's the rescission of the vote from 2 years ago. I think we need a little bit more information on that one.
All right, so I'll
Correct, Madam
take
Chair.
out 10.
All right, let's
I'll take out 10.
Okay, so electronic voting, municipal broadband, increased membership of the Master Plan Committee, and then the Cemetery Trustees Revolving Fund. So you're moving to the board support those articles.
Yes, that's my motion, yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion on any of those 4? All right, then all in favor. Mr. Doyle,
Yes.
Mr. Zulus,
Yes.
Ms. Collins,
Yes.
Mr. Wells,
Happily, yes.
and myself, yes. All right, one of them, the other ones that we haven't voted yet is the citizens petition for Algerine Corner. The Warrant Committee is going to schedule the Jerry Burke and the other citizens to come in and talk with them about that. I don't know if that's going to be for Monday night. As of last Monday, they didn't have a particular night yet for it. But I did ask the Warrant Committee to give us and the DPW an opportunity to be there to discuss this. So I think the Warrant Committee is going to be looking for our position on the citizen article, and I'm just trying to see if I can find a copy of it here. I don't have it handy in my materials for this evening, but we've seen the article. It's worded as an authorization, but does anyone have any thoughts on that? Mr. Doyle?
Madam Chair, you may want to consider discussing it with the chair of the Conservation Commission as well, to see if Mr. Cannon wants to be a part of that discussion.
Okay.
Good point.
All right. Yeah, and I think we'll want the DPW director to be, or the town engineer to be present at the warrant committee to answer questions. We are still waiting on the state opinion. Town council is following up on that. All right, why don't we defer then voting on the merits of that article until a future meeting? Is there anything else on the town meeting articles? All right, seeing none, let's move on to item 11, which is the draft that Mr. Zawinski prepared for us regarding the MBTA communities zoning and a comment letter to the Department of Housing and Community Development. As everyone knows, Mr. Zawinski presented this to us and gave a lengthy presentation on the zoning challenges that will be facing us itself. We also then received some comments from the planning board, and I just took Mr. Zawinski's initial draft and added in the planning board's comments largely at the end under a new category. We also received comments from Alex Whiteside along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing this obviously, that the proposed regulations may be broader than what the initial legislation was. And I have not added anything on that issue. I just haven't had time to really focus on it. So I don't know, the comments are not due until the end of the month. I don't know if anyone feels strongly about whether we should add something along those lines to this draft, or if we have any comments on the revised draft. So let's open it up to discussion. Ms. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought it was a very good draft, and I appreciate Mr. Zawinski's work, the planning board's additions, and your bringing it together. I did read Mr. Whiteside's comments, and I just wonder if there's a place for town council or special counsel to weigh in on that, and you know, because I'm not sure that I have the expertise to say whether that's true or not, but it's a good question. Thank you.
Okay. Well, since the comments are not due until the end of the month, we could, if we wanted to, we could approve this substantially in this form, subject to checking into that and maybe adding a couple of sentences about it once we consult with council. Do we have any other changes or additions to the letter? Or would anyone like to make a motion? Mr. Wells.
I'm just wondering, Madam Chair, when you look at this closely, particularly the neighborhoods that are outlined here, when you, probably not for any of us on this board that are here now, looking down the road, you can potentially see significant changes to these neighborhoods as to how they appear today, as to how they're laid out and how they were laid out years ago. I just wonder if somehow maybe we should have a public hearing. I don't know. I just that one aspect of it really concerns me, because you think about how, look at just how some of the 40Bs come, buy up this, buy up this, buy up this, and then all of a sudden they come with us with a proposal. This you could do to a much wider spectrum and truly change. Like I walked it the other day. I took the train. I walked the bike path again. You could potentially just the Elliott Street corridor could look completely different 10 years from now than it does today. I think that somehow we need to make sure people. You were the one who said it was coming like a freight train, and you were right, but I don't think most people understand what this could potentially look like 10 years from now. Just a thought. I think we need to talk about it.
Well, yeah, and in all fairness, I was quoting the planning director with that expression.
Yeah, you're right. Whatever. You're absolutely correct. Just you think.
But to those points, Mr. Wells, I think Tim Zawinski brought out the challenges that the trolley route being up against the river and including Boston, compared to other communities that have commuter rail stations that are in the center of their town. So there's not an issue of impacting another community within the half-mile radius, or having the natural resource of the river, basically, an unbuildable area right next to it. So I think he brings those points out, and he also brings out the fact that there are bus routes that cross the town, and East Milton Square would be an appropriate 40R district, but so maybe could be considered for this. So I think he's raised some good points that address the issue you just raised. And this is only the stage where we're commenting on the initial guidelines. You know, most of the time when an agency puts out its first draft of regulations or guidelines, a lot of comments that are received, and then there's some changes that are made. So we'll have to wait and see what's in the final regulations. It may be that there's a good number of changes. So we won't really know what it's going to look like in 10 years until we, and as Tim pointed out, for anybody who's watching, you know, this, all we have to do is create zoning. We don't have to guarantee any particular number of units here. So
No, I get that, but as we all know, just what we've seen in the most recent, as I said, some of the more recent proposals, developers buy up things that we don't even know about. They go around, they knock doors, buy this house, buy that, and then all of a sudden, boom. You know, what happens if you will remember this. Okay, what was it called, Milton, when they were going to do the DPW yard? What was it called, Milton LLC? They had 8 houses on Randolph Ave, none of us. I remember going to the first meeting, not a soul realized that one developer had bought 8 houses side by side. It just, so just a thought.
agree. Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought this was very well done. It may not be the last call on this, but what strikes me is the magnitude of this issue and its impact upon the community. And from my point of view, the advisability of getting into the queue as early as possible with a position statement from the town of Milton. One that can be augmented subsequently as additional information comes to the forefront, whether it's from legal sources, from private citizens, etc. So with that in mind, I would move the adoption of the letter and its communication so that we are on record and then have the capability of, as I mentioned, augmenting our position in the future.
Okay, although the comment deadline is the 31st, so
Understood.
we don't have that much time, but so do we not want to pursue the questions about the comments that Mr. Whiteside raised?
Madam Chair, I'll second that, subject to if a friendly amendment to Arthur, if we could, I'd be comfortable just running this by him away in bounds for any comments this is their specialty, just anything that they may want to add to address some of the issues that Arthur brought up and any other members might.
I accept the friendly amendment.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
Seconded. Okay. Do we have any other discussion? All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, that was
Madam
my-
Chair, may I follow up on my earlier comment with a related suggestion? And that is that looking at the map as best as one could determine it, and by that I don't mean the map that accompanies the letter, but rather the MBTA entire transportation route map, it appeared that there are some other communities that are similarly situated. They have a line of one form or another that abuts their town boundary. And it may be well worth reaching out to those communities to find out exactly what positions they may be formulating and see whether or not there is something that might be collectively done by like communities in addition to what we would be doing as an individual community.
Okay. All right, and I want to just recognize and thank Mr. Zawinski again for all of his efforts drafting our comment letter.
Amen.
All right, so I didn't hear any opposition to deferring number 12, and our procurement officer has some follow-up steps that Kevin Freitag alerted us to today that need to be done. So we'll defer the lease for the former East Milton Library until our next meeting, hopefully the 6th, if not the 13th. The next item is a very short comment letter on 728 Randolph Avenue, the 40B proposal, which all it does is just a form that attaches our project eligibility stage letter and our comments on affordable housing generally.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the comment letter to the Board of Appeals relative to 728 Randolph Avenue, and thank you for drafting it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Myself, yes. We have a change of directors of the Wollaston Golf Club, which has a couple of licenses from the board. We have a complete package, an application for amendment showing their change of officers. Do we have a motion? Or any
Madam
questions or discussion?
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the change of directors at the Wollaston Golf Club.
I'll second. Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus? Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Myself, yes. Okay, we have a couple of charitable contributions to the Milton Coalition.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the charitable contribution to the Milton Coalition in the amount of $50 from the Rosenfeld Lesson family.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thank you to the donor. Next one.
Madam Chair, I move to accept the charitable contribution to the Milton Coalition in the amount of, it says 50, is that correct, or was it 500?
I thought it was 500.
That was
500.
Yes,
500.
from the First Congregational Church of Milton, thank you.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yeah.
Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, thank you to the First Congregational Church. All right, that brings us to the town administrator's report.
Madam Chair, I do not have a report this evening.
Okay, well, you've already given us a report on the main thing you've been working on, so that's the most important. Thank you. The chair's report, I just wanted to mention, since our last meeting, we had the EPA's mid-year event recognizing officially or declaring the Neponset River a Superfund site, and Mr. Doyle, Mr. Wells, and I were able to attend. It was, Senator Warren was there, Congressman Lynch, Congressman Presley, Representative Fluker Oakley, and the mayor of Boston, and many other officials from not only the EPA, but also Mass DEP. And it really was a very nice event, and finally good news. We had submitted a letter last fall that everyone knows, supporting and thanking the EPA for designating the river as a Superfund site. It was acknowledged at the meeting that we are talking about years. Somebody said we're talking just about years and not decades, but it's a long process. But they're beginning the effort to start the cleanup eventually, but they're doing a lot of research first to determine the different contaminants and what needs to be done. So it is going to be a long process, but it was a really kind of a celebratory mood there at the right on the bridge over the Neponset, and a nice addition to all of the work that has been done on that bike path and some of the economic revitalization in Lower Mills and in the Mattapan side, as well as the Milton side. So just was a very nice event and welcome news for Milton and Boston. And we had a few other members from the Milton community who were there. Lee Toma from our bicycle committee and really everything outdoors, and Tom Palmer, a new member of the Conservation Commission, and Pete Jackson. So it was nice to have some representation of the town at the event.
Now, former state representative in sense, Linda Docina Forey, who
Yes.
was there at the beginning when the bike path was first conceived and came to reality. It's over 20 years ago. She was a happy, as we took a great photo with the Milton contingent. I hope that makes the Times tomorrow with her, because she was a huge advocate for all of her years in both the House and the Senate.
Times had a lot of coverage of this last week too, and it just good news all around. So I just wanted to officially report it at one of our televised meetings. Mr. Zulus.
Well, I was just going to say, my understanding is from all accounts that this board and the town were very well represented by the chair's remarks on behalf of us. So I want to thank the chair for that.
Thank you very much. Tried to follow the rule to be brief. So that was the thing. I have nothing else to report this evening. Does anyone have a report tonight?
None here, Madam Chair.
Mr. Zulus?
No report, Madam Chair.
Okay, Ms. Collins?
No report. Thank you, Madam.
Mr. Wells?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. We have minutes to approve. I have to confess, I haven't had a lot of time to look at the minutes. I kind of skimmed through a couple of them. We have some Governor Stoughton minutes on at our later meeting. Did anyone have any changes or did anyone already submit any changes to Lynn on the minutes?
Madam Chair, I found no substantive changes in reviewing them, so I would move adoption of the minutes for February 9, 2022, February 15, 2022, and February 16, 2022.
Second.
All right. The one thing I would like to ask, if Lynn could do this tomorrow, is for the February 9th minutes, if we could just add numbering, which we've started to do for the next group. Well, actually, it looks like the 16th, we need to add numbering as well. It's a lot easier for somebody years laid down the road who's looking back at minutes for something to find it if there's numbering. So, any discussion on the motion?
I'll just offer an amendment, a friendly amendment that we approve them in substantially the form as presented. So if there are ministerial changes, then that shouldn't be a problem.
Agree.
Fine there.
Okay. I agree. All in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
Self, yes. Number 20, public comment response. Anyone have a response to public comment tonight? I think we addressed we didn't really talk about parking, but we did talk. There was an update on the deck project, yeah, we're gonna have Ms. Fagan follow up on the flag request.
Yes.
Okay. And we've discussed with Bob, yes, the Ms. Felton's concerns.
Recording in progress.
Future agenda dates. So our next meetings are April 6th and April 13th. And I'll just reiterate, we were planning to be in person this evening. We went back to the Zoom environment because we were notified by Milton Access Television that there was not the capability to televise us at the Council on Aging building, but that we would have that capability available in April. So I assume that we can be back in person on April 6th, but we'll double check that with MATV and see if there's any issues. It's at public comment. Ms. Felton mentioned the hybrid meetings. I think we should double check on that as well, because I thought that was not currently that MATV was not currently capable of doing that, but we're still a couple of months away from that, but that may no longer be accurate. So I think we should check on that. Linda, you have your hand up. Do you have some information?
I do, Madam Chair. I spoke with Shane at Milton Cable Access. He wanted to see if we could do Zoom for the April 6th meeting.
Okay. Why don't we follow up with MATV tomorrow and just find out their reasoning and what the capacity is at the COA, and if not the COA, if there's another room, whether it's the Cronin room or the Blue room, where we might be able to get back in person. And obviously, I want to open it up to everyone else and see what your thoughts are. But I mean, our plan was to go back in person tonight, and I think there's a lot of reasons to get back in person if we can, to try to lead the way for town meeting, but also because, we've got one of our sets of minutes tonight was 10 pages long because they're roll call votes. And once we're back in person, we eliminate the roll call votes. And I just think there's a lot of benefits to us being in person. So what does everyone think? If we're able to hold it in the Blue room or somewhere else, should we pursue that? Anyone have a preference?
Question, Madam Chair?
Richard, Mike has his hand raised, and I just
Oh,
recognized.
sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Come to you.
I was just going to say that I'm in favor of getting back in person. Schools
Okay.
are back in person. I think we can get back. I'm in favor of that.
Okay, Mr. Wells?
No, I'm fine. I'm the same, Madam Chair. I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, if no other thoughts, we'll follow up with MATV and see what the options are. But thank you for that information, Lynn. That's helpful to know. And if anyone has any future agenda items, if you don't have them tonight, let's notify the town administrator. Community happenings. All right, we have an executive session on our board agenda, but I think it might make sense if we, especially for television purposes, if we recess the select board meeting and then go into the Governor Stoughton meeting for minutes and then come back into the select board meeting. So do we have a motion to recess the select board meeting?
So moved.
I heard two people, so that's a motion and a second. All in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
And Mr. Wells?
Yes.
All right, so at 9:08, we'll open a meeting of the Governor Stoughton trustees. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'll ask the trustees to defer item 2. There's a meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust tomorrow evening, and we're also running down some follow-up information from town council. But we have several sets of meeting minutes, and I think some of these had actually been previously approved with board minutes. We discovered after the fact that we had approved some board minutes that had Governor Stoughton minutes included with them, and normally we break them out. So a separate file that should be around here. So some of these have actually previously been voted as part of the board's minutes. And as always, when you need them, they're not right in front of you. All right, here we are. So we have the dates of, we have April 28th. We have 2021. We have May 6th of 2021. The only things I noticed on that were the time is incorrect. It should be 9:32. It says that later on, but up at the top it mentions 7:02, which is the start of the board's meeting. And then the paragraph at the bottom doesn't need to be there because that was after we adjourned the Governor Stoughton meeting. And these minutes were not done by Linda Napoli. She did not work for the town at this time. But the same issue on the June 23rd minutes, we just need to take out the last paragraph after we adjourned the Governor Stoughton meeting. The other minutes are September 22nd of 2021 and January 26th of 2022. I think January is the one that we have not yet voted, but the others have all been voted as part of the board minutes. We should just vote them separately for Governor Stoughton. So did anyone have any changes or comments on the minutes? Okay, then do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Madam Chair, I move to approve the minutes subject to the revisions that you mentioned.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Azulis?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
And Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn the Governor Stoughton meeting?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Azulis?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. All right, so we're adjourned at 9:10 for Governor Stoughton. So now we're back in the select board meeting, and we have on our agenda an executive session. Get my notes. All right, so I will move that we enter into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with all union personnel and collective bargaining strategy with respect to all union personnel. Believing that having this discussion in open session would have a detrimental effect on the negotiating or bargaining position of the select board. And we would not return to open session. We've finished our agenda otherwise, so we would adjourn from the executive session.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Mr. Doyle?
Yes.
Mr. Zulus?
Yes.
Ms. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Wells?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Okay, so thank you, everyone. It's 9:11, so we're now in executive session, and the public session has ended, so we'll wait for Milton Access Television to come back.